Ladies and gentlemen, hello. Welcome back. This is episode 4 of the How To Podcast series brought to you by Ambiguous Podcast Solutions. My name is Will Tarashuk, the founder of Ambiguous Podcast Solutions, as well as the man behind the board, Mr. Chrisitan Wright, the founder of Cube Recording Studios. Chrisitan, how are you?
Doing well, man. Ready to jump into it.
Ready.
This episode, tell us what we're going to be talking about here.
Well, today is all about our equipment, which is the software. Last time we did all the hardware. We showed you all the microphones. Some we sell, some we don't. Different accessories, things to do. Today is how you use all that equipment and what goes with it. The other half of equipment is software. So hardware is physical things. Software is like programs, stuff on your computer. So if you're doing a solo podcast, we can just get started right here, right now. Editing software. If you're doing a solo podcast, you can get away with a USB mic and either one of the softwares that we're going to list down below, being like Adobe Audition, Audacity, GarageBand, Pro Tools, or some other things. We know the different softwares like that, as well as online applications you can use for recording and editing. So we're going to break all those down. Chrisitan, what's your go-to is Pro Tools, correct?
Yes, absolutely. Pro Tools has stood the test of time, and in fact, it's the standard in audio recording. And the reason that is that because just like other standards of things, standard practices, every DAW, digital audio workstation, lower third maybe, is based off of Pro Tools. How does it match up with Pro Tools, which is considerably the greatest DAW audio workstation of all time? All the specs are there, the capabilities are there. Originally, DigiDesign, the original company before Avid bought it, they created Virtual Instruments in 1983 and they released Pro Tools in 1991. So I'm talking right when digital, they were the leader. And they continue to be the leader, and it's not only just because it's the oldest and it's the first to get to market, but the specs oftentimes are superior to other DAW programs, tons of functionality. You can do everything from recording, mixing in stereo to 7.1 surround sound. You can even edit video in Pro Tools, which people aren't really aware of. But great program. We could talk about that a little bit more later.
Yeah, we'll go into detail, but first let's kick off because that's also we'll get into pricing and all that stuff too. But free software, there are free softwares out there that are available over the internet. You can record audio for you. However, they're not always the most reliable. I'd say it's good for a solo podcast that doesn't include guests or really an internet connection. Because you can just do it by yourself. And it's like the P, remember the P stands for personal or professional. If this is the personal podcast, you just want a free software to start out, a good one is Audacity. Audacity is a free option. It's essentially the free version of Adobe Audition, which is one I use. It can record, edit your podcast, record and edit in multi-track, which is also huge. Really, the only thing I just dislike about Audacity is just physically how it looks. Or digitally how it looks. It looks.
It's the worst.
It's bizarre.
Looks like Windows 98.
It looks like it was made in 98 and they just never updated how it looks.
I mean, do you know what it is about Audacity? It's, we're talking about free programs here.
Yeah.
It's, I believe, don't quote me on it, but I believe it is open source.
That sounds correct.
It is an open source audio program where it has all the, a lot of the functionality of some of the paid ones, obviously not on the same level of quality, but you can multi-track, you can record, you can do basic stuff in there. Yeah, but it looks horrible. Open source.
Yeah, I'm going to show screenshots.
They're not in it to make money. They don't need to make it pretty.
Well, it is a great program. Otherwise, yeah, it does look 98. Yeah, see here, that's right here. Look at this. It's terrible. But for what it is, it's a great free program. Like if anyone's just trying to get started in podcasting, let's go. Just download Audacity. It works for Windows and Mac. There's essentially no difference on which OS you use it on. But Chrisitan, explain what open source means and why that can actually mean, what that can mean for, like, I guess, audio editing or DAWs.
So open source essentially is a product. It is a software that the back end of it, the code. I don't know if you guys have ever accidentally clicked something while you're on your internet browser and this whole window of code pops
it's like
open.
You hit F12 and accident, like, damn it.
It's a lot more complicated than that, but essentially what it is, it's the back end coding of the software is embedded into it's all embedded into every software, but you can actually access it. So it basically means any coder, anybody who comes along who wants to upgrade the program, which is probably why it hasn't been upgraded. Maybe it just wasn't of interest to, to people. They can come along, copy that code, put it into their building software. I'm not aware of what those softwares might be. Python, SQL, all these things. But they can expand upon the program and make it better. So what that means is that it's improvable by the public. And if you wanted to reverse engineer it, you could easily go into the open source, code, and update it. But what that means for you as a podcaster doesn't really mean much. Does the program work for you? Does it not? Is there room for improvement? It won't be probably scheduled and regular, like if you paid for another program that wasn't open source or was a paid service. So definitely something to keep in mind if you're looking for the latest features. Well, you might have to wait around a little while.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, if it's looking for something for free and you just need it for yourself, great. Highly suggest it. Now, if you're doing in-person interviews as well, another great tool is also Audacity. I'm not sure how it would work. I would need to test this out if I can record on multi-track, how I record on multi-track with Audition. But if you're going to record on multi-track and spend extra money on the equipment, you might as well spend extra money and get an Adobe Audition or Pro Tools or even a GarageBand. Yeah, free software, super useful if it's a personal podcast, solo podcast, or even something that's in person. But once you go past that, you might as well pay something. My go-to is Adobe Audition. It's my pick. It's what I learned first. Honestly, I'm a PC guy as well. I know Audition is available on Mac, but the Adobe Suite, it doesn't run as smooth as it does on PC.
Really?
I think so.
Because I mean, I use Premiere for
for video
editing.
For video editing.
In Photoshop. But yeah, I've also used those programs back when I was a PC guy.
Well, it's mostly because like Macs like their own software. Like when Pro Tools was released on Mac.
No,
originally?
It was originally
Mac wasn't around back then.
Well, yeah, no, we're talking 1991, so I'd imagine it was a very early
Linux, maybe
early version of some OS. I mean, if you go back far enough, you got MS-DOS.
Yeah,
it wasn't run on DOS.
So somewhere along the line, Pro Tools became the Mac standard. Like every Mac user used Pro Tools.
Yes, and that's not because it was originally released on Mac. I'm pretty sure. I could look that up. You keep going.
All right, so back to Audition. Yeah, Audition is my go-to. It's a software. It's the one I use for all my editing. It's one I use for my recording. It's what I learned first. It's what I learned in college. And I just stuck with it. It records, it edits, it mixes, it does so many different things that I don't even use on it. I use it in the most, I'm not gonna say basic, but in terms of like an editor like Chrisitan or like an actual editor who makes like mix and masters like movies or music or songs and stuff like that, I use it in most basic of function for podcasting. I love their effects racks, which is mainly what I do for my podcast. It's like once I get a raw piece of audio, I throw a few effects racks on it. It has like a denoiser and just a few things like that, normalizing the audio and recording in multi-track. Recording in multi-track is huge. You can do anything you can think of in audio editing and mixing on Adobe Audition. It works great for newbies. It works great for experienced pros, and it's great for learning. One thing I will say about Adobe that they do the best is their customer support is excellent. Their customer support is incredible.
That's important.
Yeah, because if I have an issue, I just go to adobe.com, go in their chat feature, and just tell them what it is. Within 15, 20 minutes, it's usually solved. Like Chris maybe would actually help me out with this one. So I record on multi-track.
Yep.
With the King's Rings podcast.
Yep.
And after 45 minutes of recording perfect audio,
yes,
the audio gets all crackly and staticky, and by the end, it's just like it's unintelligible
at all.
So
sounds like a sample rate issue.
It might be really okay. Interesting. Because what they'll tell me to do is they tell me to clear my cache and reinstall it, which sometimes works, but sometimes it doesn't. And it only happens on my desktop, my tower. But if I do
you have a good amount of RAM?
32 gigs. Yeah, I got plenty of RAM.
I've had that happen to me in the past when I was using a smaller, not so good interface.
No, I'm using the Rodecaster.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like the fact that it only happens on my PC and not this HP laptop in front of me.
Mm.
It records just fine on the HP.
I'd have to look at, because I remember when I was having the issue, I was able to fix it. I'd have to look into that, so you could have
If I had to guess,
more than 45 minutes of perfect
If
audio.
I had to guess, I'm gonna blame Skype because I hate Skype.
You're on Skype.
We're on Skype, so all my audio is going through Audition as well as Skype. But either way, I can reach out to Audition within 25 minutes. It'll be fixed. They have these weird fixes, and they're very, very helpful.
Yeah. Good customer service is very important if you're new to the game.
Mm-hmm.
Where like some other platforms, say Pro Tools, for example, people that typically use Pro Tools kind of have the know-how because it's a professional,
it's pro.
It's an industry standard.
They put the pro in Pro Tools
for recording studios, exactly. So customer support's not great. It is great. However, you actually have to pay to
same with Audition.
You have to pay.
Same with Audition. If you don't pay,
we could get into a whole conversation about that. I don't like that. If you're paying a subscription, you should be able to. Customer support should be built into the subscription.
Whoa. The customer support isn't built into the subscription?
No.
That's absurd.
You have to. I think it's $20 or $30 for a ticket.
That
is
absurd.
And you have a certain amount of time. It's one of the things I'm actually upset about with Avid, because this was never a DigiDesign thing. So Pro Tools got bought out by another company.
Damn.
Yeah.
Damn.
The program's still amazing, but customer support, it's like,
customer support.
You can email them, but their timeline for getting back to you is a lot longer. It's like 2 weeks, as opposed to if you paid a ticket, it's like same day.
Their chats are incredible.
Yeah.
So I'm still kind of figuring that out. There are some things. There is a bit of a learning curve with Audition and as well as Pro Tools. Like, you do kind of have to know what you're doing. You can learn. Adobe also has these learning guides. So like once you download it and open a program, it'd be like, hey, watch these videos, learn how to use it. Super useful. I taught myself After Effects, and I started with Illustrator and a few others. I think not Photoshop, it was a different one. I don't remember. But I used those tutorials and followed along. And it's super useful. And it's all on their website. And you can also go to YouTube. There's plenty of people to help you out there. But like their multi-track feature is the best to me, because I can record stereo audio, which means it's a mixed audio. So it's all of the like underlying channels just in one file. It's also an individual mono channel for myself. It's an individual stereo channel for my co-hosts, either in person or on the internet in Skype or Zoom. And then it's an additional channel for any sound effects from my Rodecaster Pro, which is super important. Now, only certain interfaces will let you go with the multi-channel on Audition, which is bizarre. Like, Christian, I had like an actual mixer. Not an interface, is an actual mixer. And it wouldn't let me record in multi-channel. And I never knew why. So I don't know what the Rodecaster has that the other interfaces or other mixers don't. So what enables something to be able to record in multi-channel in the interface?
Well, typically mixers are not. They're typically not for recording.
Yeah.
They're typically for live music. They have.
So there would be no sense to split them up then.
Right. I mean, they have features that allow you, like people like DJs who would, plug into a computer, virtual mix DJ kind of thing, where they have the mixer and that's how they're doing things. But typically mixers aren't for, home recording. They're for live music. And I don't blame you, because at one point I used a mixer until I learned that interfaces were the way to go. I don't know exactly the technical specs, but I would imagine it's just having separate, clearly separate channels inside of the box.
That's probably what it is then. Yeah.
Some of them probably meant to be like played and then summed into a stereo channel that flows into the computer.
I also just love the interface of
like live music
of Audition, like the green, how everything's green. I don't know why.
The GUI.
The GUI. Like,
it's important.
You can change that color to be orange or red or whatever, but I just like the green.
Customization.
The customization's great. Customer support's great. There was a bit of a learning curve, but you can teach yourself, and it's great. So I would suggest Audition. It's about $23 a month for the individual, but at that point, if you're doing video, you can pay. I think it's $53 a month for the whole suite, which is totally worth it. I'm a big fan of Adobe.
Adobe's good.
But from there, other free ones, GarageBand, GarageBand specifically for Mac. Now, I know GarageBand is an option. I have very, very, very little experience doing it. I did it probably about half a dozen times for on a job site using a little mixer, 2 microphones, and GarageBand, and somehow I got to record on multi-tracks. I don't remember. It's just the settings were weird. The interface was a little weird. And to me, GarageBand is more of music mixing and like making like songs and stuff like that. Not necessarily for podcasting. Whereas like Audition or Pro Tools, it can be used for podcasting specifically, but it's also used for these other things. I feel like GarageBand specifically used for music, but can also be used for podcasting. It's a little backwards. Christian, any experience with GarageBand? Yeah, because being a Mac guy.
Yeah. First good song I'd say I made was on GarageBand. I feel that realistically, to make a podcast, you don't need a lot of features. You need to be able to multi-track, and that's pretty much it. I think GarageBand is a feasible option if you have a Mac. You don't got to get anything else. It's already on the computer. I do to your point, Will. There are a lot of other features. There's loops, there's things, but you don't got to touch that stuff. So if you want to kind of just keep it simple, you just hit record.
Yeah, like I would suggest it to you if you are a musician, you in the music world, you already use it, and you're looking to start a podcast. There's no need to buy something else or use something else. If you already use it for podcasting. Pretty much is my advice if you know how to use it. But it's free. If you're a Mac user out there and you want to give it a shot, try it out. Also, a quick back to Audition real quick. You got to make sure your RAM, you have at least 8 gigabytes of RAM in your computer. Otherwise, it will not run properly. So that is important. Pro Tools. Let's go over to Pro Tools again, Christian.
Yep.
Let's go like specs. Like the basic specs for your computer. Like, what did you say? 8 gigs of RAM pretty much for Pro Tools? Sounds about right.
Yeah, I'd say you could run it on 4, but it depends on.
You couldn't do much else though.
Well, the thing is, if you're not going to be doing a ton of processing, using a lot of plugins and things, then 4 will work. But I think really, if you're going to be recording any audio, you should really try to start at about 8 gigs of RAM.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're doing any basic podcast production, and most laptops nowadays will come with 8. Back when I started in 2015, 8 wasn't. It was common, but it wasn't the basic. It wasn't like the floor, right? Nowadays, I think 8 is probably the floor for most laptops. It's because computing itself requires more power, so the basic minimum of computers is more power. So, I would say 8 gigabytes of RAM. Graphics card really doesn't matter for audio editing. An average Intel i5 processor core for your CPU should be fine. If you want to do a little more, you can get an i7. But the base should be an i5, should be just about fine. And I don't know what that would be for AMD, but yeah, just Google it. Like also, like any program you use, a Pro Tools or an Audition, you go to their website, they will have like the required specs and the recommended specs for the computer, and you can go in your computer settings, whether it's Mac or PC, and check those specs and just cross check.
And don't try to. As much as you're going to want to just get started, if you're below the specs, it might be worth upgrading.
Yeah, it will not work.
You don't want to be in a situation where you're in the middle of recording something and it says overload.
Yeah.
Check HW buffer size is, typically what it might say.
Or your computer's running hot and it just crashes.
Or
you get the blue screen of death.
You've run out of RAM. You don't want to get these alerts, especially you're in the middle of something, especially if you're doing a podcast that involves 2 people.
Yeah.
Or 2 or more people. So definitely go and review those specs and try to have a computer that's up to par.
Yeah.
You don't need a supercomputer, but you just need some minimums.
Especially for audio, you don't need a supercomputer. Video, a supercomputer helps.
Absolutely.
Like a supercomputer will definitely help for video. Like I'm gonna upgrade my graphics card by the end of the year, and exporting is gonna be so much faster. We're gonna have now I have 8 gigs of RAM in my graphics card. I'm gonna bump up to 24. So it's gonna be 3 times faster, which is gonna be excellent.
Should I tell them about this bad boy?
Yeah, tell them about your computer. Cause like the computer you run is absurd, and it's like it can cover anything and everything you need ever.
It is absolutely absurd. It has 64 gigabytes of RAM, 3.5 gigahertz, 8 core Intel.
Mm-hmm. I think mine's 12 core.
3.5.
Maybe
it's probably like 2.6 or something. Let's see if we gotta add our numbers up.
I'll go home and check.
But 64 gigs of RAM. That's I
got 32.
I'm going into I could CIA firewalls. type of stuff. But yeah, check your specs, guys.
Yeah, and if this is all confusing to you, all this computer talk, use an Audacity or GarageBand or other free tools like a SquadCast or a Riverside, which we're going to get into in a little
that
bit.
will not need as much computer resources.
Yeah, and all that is built into their softwares. And if you do know what we're talking about, great, power to you. If you're a business, hire someone who does, essentially. Like, if you're a business, I would definitely suggest a Pro Tools or an Audition. Whether
Adobe, Avid, those are go-to names for a reason.
Yeah. So, Christian, what's your favorite part, your favorite feature that Pro Tools has that others do not?
I like that you can use it for, it's not one particular feature. I like that you could use it for anything. You could use it for recording, mixing, mastering in stereo to surround sound. You can do movie work in Pro Tools.
Mm-hmm.
You can also edit videos in Pro Tools. You can produce in Pro Tools. And the plugins that Pro Tools comes with in 2022 they come with the program, and they're just as, arguably some of them are just as good as industry standards. So if you really need to do a crazy production, mixing and mastering video scenario, or anything a combination of, some of those things or all of those things, Pro Tools can handle it. It has a lot of headroom, not the level that's coming in on your meter on your interface. It has a lot of headroom, meaning you can make things very loud in Pro Tools if you needed to without clipping. We don't want clipping is digital distortion. Don't want that. Sounds like a car wreck. And just the overall functionality.
I do like that. It's like the foundation. Like, it was first. It's the one everyone copied.
There's like every feature you could possibly need: time stretching, changing pitch, slicing things, adjusting the individual level of a region or a word. You can get very,
very granular,
very, very granular, very surgical, in the weeds, other colloquialisms that I'm not thinking of right now.
Well, when we get to our editing episode,
yes,
we're going to go into nitty gritty of like what it means to denoise, declip. What does normalizing audio mean? Like, pretty much like editing terms, like what that all means and how it can apply to a podcast. We're going to do all that. So stay tuned for all that fun stuff. How expensive is Pro Tools? Is it monthly or one charge up front?
So it used to be, man, the world that we're in now, everything is subscription based.
Yeah,
they're not letting you go. Pro Tools has its tiers. So Pro Tools actually
extra interesting.
What's interesting about Pro Tools, just recently, in the last 2 years, they released a free version.
Extra interesting.
And it is called Pro Tools First. Same DNA of the full Pro Tools.
How would it compare to an Audacity or GarageBand?
It's Pro Tools, so it would blow Audacity out of the water.
All right, so if we're recommending free software to people, Pro Tools free then would be the recommendation.
Pro Tools First.
Pro Tools First, and it's available on Mac and PC.
Yes, and it's free. The difference between Pro Tools First and the Pro Tools that I'm currently recording on, Pro Tools Ultimate, is just restrictions within the program. So that it's the same DNA. It's like having a very expensive Porsche, but you can only drive to 50 miles an hour.
You can only drive it locally.
Yeah,
you can't go on the highway.
And what I mean,
you can't go on the highway.
Yeah, exactly. What I mean by that is that you can't have an absurd amount of tracks. With Pro Tools Ultimate, I think you can open up 768 tracks. It's like the limit. You're podcasting, guys. You don't need 768 tracks.
You would need 4 max.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it comes with less plugins and things like that. But for all intents and purposes, it's the same Pro Tools.
Right.
So that's Pro Tools First. Then there's a $30 a month one if you needed more tracks and some of the extra features that you wouldn't need as a podcaster. And then there's the $80 to $85 a month one, which is the heavy duty. Nothing can stop this thing.
So the most features required for a podcast would probably be, remember we talked about the narrative-based podcast, like sound effects and music and like voiceovers. Like it'd be like an audiobook, but it's a podcast.
Right.
Could you do that on Pro Tools First?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So if you're out there, the APS suggestion for free software is Pro Tools First. It's all you would need. And it's 100% free.
Yeah, it's free. It's good stuff.
Cool. All right. So now let's go over to it. So if you don't want to buy software and kind of a learning curve, there are other options out there where you can record stuff like an Anchor, stuff like a SquadCast, Riverside. et cetera, et cetera. So let's kind of break down a few of those. Let's start with SquadCast. Now, full disclosure, I've never used it.
Never heard of it.
Never heard of it, but I know it's an option, and I've heard it's an option. That's pretty much what my whole shtick about it is. Never actually used it. I just know it exists. So I went on the website. I ran through their features, and basically they have local and cloud recording as well as an autosave feature. So, Chris, can you explain to me the difference between local and cloud recording?
Local and cloud recording. So, we're still talking about SquadCast?
Yes.
Okay. Because I think the next thing we're talking about also has that as well.
Probably. They do.
Yeah.
Local and cloud storage.
So local, that refers to, so if you're doing a podcast and it's video, it's not just audio, even if it is audio or if it's video, basically if the video or the audio is being recorded cloud-based, then that means the quality of the audio and or video will depend on the bandwidth of the people that are using it. Now, if it's local, that means, and this is while you're recording it, because you're making a podcast, you're not just having a video chat here.
Right.
You're recording it. So if there's any skips or breaks in audio, that will be apparent to the other person on the other side. But okay, that's only one half of the pie. When you finish the podcast, you hit stop recording and you go to check it out and you're like, okay, what do we got? What's the quality? With local recording, that means it is recorded on your machine, respective machines, the person, you yourself, the other person on the other end of the line. And once you're done, it stops recording. It saves the file locally on your computer, and then it uploads. And then you see, that's the final product, as opposed to it being cloud-based and all of those skips, if there are any skips, depending on the internet connection of either of you, they won't be there. So that's the major benefit to having it local as opposed to, cloud-based.
I definitely prefer local recording. Like, all my recordings are local.
Was that clear?
That was very clear.
Okay.
That was very clear, especially the skips part. I didn't know about the skips part. So recording locally to me is huge, because I would rather rely more on I would rather apply more pressure to the machine than the internet connection. If that makes sense. Like, I'd rather have a stronger machine to handle the load as opposed to relying on internet connection, because anything can happen.
And every person you're podcasting, you don't know the specs of their internet connection.
Yeah.
You might have a super router right next to you. Doesn't mean that they do,
Exactly.
unless you're going to do that much due diligence and send them a router every time you do a podcast with somebody. You're going to want to have it recording locally.
Yeah.
For that final product to be smooth and seamless.
And it's a good backup too. It's always a good backup.
Yep.
But SquadCast also records tracks separately, so everything will be in sync. That's essentially recording in multi-track. That's what a Pro Tools or an Audition already does. Already has that feature built in, but they do it automatically, which is great. That's a big feature. If you're looking for these online recordings, soft platforms, that is something you definitely want to look for. It records tracks separately, so it's easier to edit as well. You can create templates for other meetings and reuse settings, which I think is also really cool. So say you have typically you do a 3-person interview, like a 3-person podcast, like me, Christian, and a co-host. But you also have episodes where it's just me and Christian. You can set up a template where it's 2 people and 3 people. Or you can have templates for different, I'm assuming different designs. So Ambiguous Podcast Solutions has the yellow bubbles background, whereas Talking with Tarashuk has the orange bubble background when we're recording remotely. So stuff like that is very, very useful. I thought that was a great feature to have. Team management on the back end, which is also really cool. So it's like me, it's my podcast. I am the owner of the podcast. I can assign team members to the job like an editor, right? And they can have special features to special access. Like, I can only write the description. They can only download the audio, stuff like that. So if you're managing a team, also super useful for stuff like that. A green room for testing audio and video before you actually hop into the call, which I thought was really cool as well. So if someone's coming into your meeting, they can test before they actually go into the interview. I don't think it's not a huge difference, but it's really just optics more than anything else.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you've got something on your face, maybe, or maybe you want to adjust your camera a little bit, or maybe your microphone's not working. If you're doing a podcast, you want it to be as smooth, as seamless, as professional as possible. Having a place where people can check themselves beforehand can make a big difference. So you don't have to, spend 10, 15 minutes doing that beforehand. Person
Yeah.
come
I
on
mean,
early, they can check themselves out, make sure everything's good. You can make sure everything's good on your end, and then
you could also have like a team member probably in that green room. Like, so say like
to assist.
Yeah, to assist. So say the podcast is with like, I don't know, the founder of a company, like me. Like, say I had a super fat ego and I was just kind of an asshole, and like I was somewhat famous, and my team wanted to make sure that once the guest hops in, they're ready to go. So like, I remember my team could be in the green room testing their audio, getting them framed up, making sure everything's good to go. So once they're in with me, there's no kinks. There's nothing to work out. Everything's ready to go. It's also super embarrassing. Like, if I hop on a Zoom call and they can't hear me and I'm trying to figure it out, it's embarrassing. So a green room can kind of get rid of that.
Yeah.
Also, I thought was cool. It's browser based, so there's nothing to download. Everything is done online, which again has its perks and its flaws. The perk is, if you have like a regular laptop, if you have like an HP like I got with not the best specs, all you need is a good internet connection, and for the most part, you should be okay. But you're also relying on the internet connection. So if something kicks out or you reach a schism, you're screwed.
SquadCast records. It's cloud based.
Yeah, it's both. We're cloud and local.
Okay, cool. Gotcha.
But I'm assuming you would need to download and use another app for editing. I didn't see anything in their package that had anything to do with editing the actual podcast. There's no like interface from you actually edit stuff on. So that was a big downside for me, where it's just like, okay, I can record stuff on here, but if I need to get something else to edit it on, I could also record it on that. Unless your podcast is super raw or you hand it off to an editor and they take care of it, that would be my only guess. But it's just, I'm an all-in-one guy. If something is all-in-one, I think it's more useful.
Absolutely.
So I am not saying you should or shouldn't use SquadCast. I'm just saying it is an option. It is available in $20, $40, and $80 per month tiers. So you can go check out the website and check out like what the different tiers mean and this, that, and the other. Chris, what do you think of SquadCast just overall?
Based off what you're saying, it sounds pretty cool. And the major differentiator between the next platform we're going to speak on, I think, is the fact that there's no in-house editing features.
Yeah.
Which again I think is really important, especially if you're going to be charging, $80 a month.
Up to $80 a month.
I pay $80 a month for Pro Tools.
Yeah.
85.
Yeah.
So, that's just my 2 cents on that.
All right. So the next one up is Riverside. I have not heard one bad thing about Riverside ever. Again, I have never.
So you heard it from me and other people as well?
Other people. Yep.
Okay.
I've had people ask me if I've used it, seeing what I think about it. And I go back and ask them how it is. They love it. Everyone, I promise you, I've never heard one bad thing said about this platform. That being said, I have never used it because I don't need it, because I have other avenues and ways of doing things. But anyone who used it said it's fantastic. So take that for a grain of salt to what it is.
I used it once.
What'd you think?
I thought it was interesting. I loved it. Was the first time I was introduced to the idea of local recording, which I thought was great. I love how it had wave quality recording. And I also loved the built-in editor. And I love how they basically, when you come into the program, it has you be 3 different positions: either a guest, a host, or a producer. So the implication is, okay, these are the parts. You're gonna have a producer, somebody who's gonna be assisting with the audio, with the video, kind of as we spoke to with the other thing with the green room. Someone involved, making sure things go smoothly. And what the producer can do, there's actually a button on there to click highlight. So basically you can create, a lot of times when we create podcasts, we end up turning things into social clips and things like that. There's a highlight button that helps you find those quickly after the podcast is over. Like start, stop, start, stop. Like, this is a highlight, start, stop. I thought that was pretty cool too. So
really cool.
And it's free.
There is a free tier.
The free tier, to me, in my opinion, is good enough.
That's good. So like how I view it is like it takes all the pros of Zoom, it takes all the pros of a SquadCast, it takes all the pros of I think it's called the name's escaping me. But Zencaster. It takes all the pros of a Zencaster, which in 2017 when I used it, I wanted to throw it out the window. I hated it. But since then I've heard it's better. It takes all those like online web-based platforms, rolls it all into one, and just makes it the best of all worlds. So it also does video, right? It records the video in 4K as well, which
I think that may be the higher tier platform.
Most definitely.
I think it's 1080p for the free version,
which is still pretty crazy.
Which is still good. And you know what? Maybe 720, but still, it's
yes. If I had to guess, 720 is standard HD.
It's
on the free tier.
720.
If I had to guess, the $15 is 1080p, which is HD, like high HD, and then the $24 a month tier is probably 4K, which is 3080p. So yeah, really cool.
I never really got that.
What?
Like why they just round for the Ks.
Well, we could call it 38K. 4K sounds better.
3.8K.
3.8K.
It ain't 4, man. It ain't 4.
That's why when you buy.
But the thing is, they kept it going. You know, they had 2K, then they had 3K. We're up to 5. My GoPro shoots in 5K. That's really 4,800 pixels.
Yeah, it's 4,800 pixels.
It's like you guys, you know, maybe for the first time, but you're just rounding here.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's like when they do it when you buy a hard drive, right? When you buy an
false
SSD.
Advertisement,
when you buy an SSD and it's 2 terabytes, it's actually like 1.84.
Yeah, I don't.
I think that's because there's stuff on the actual drive that you can't delete because otherwise the whole thing wouldn't work.
That is the reason.
So yeah, it's little slimy, but they're technically not wrong.
You know what I'm saying? If it's like with frame rate, 60 frames per second. It's 60 frames per second.
Yeah. Well,
which we'll get into it.
We'll get into in a little bit. But you did mention records and wave files, which is cool. Like yeah, that's cool.
Well, I could tell you something about waves.
Yeah. Okay. So break down the coolness of wave files. And after you do that, I'm gonna say why it doesn't matter at all. So. Break down why waves are cool.
I know where you're gonna go for it. So yep. I'm gonna build it up and then burst the bubble.
Yep.
All right. So wave files.
Put that camera on you.
Wave files. There has always been. It's like, oh, you know, waves higher quality. Waves higher quality. No, people say that they don't really know what it means. It is factually higher quality. I'll tell you why.
Yeah, it's irrefutable.
The human hearing range. This is real scientific, real nerdy stuff, but it's facts. I audio engineer, you know, so I understand this stuff. The human hearing range is 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz, arguably, right? Now, sound is made up of frequencies, so a low sound is going to be higher than just different parts of the frequency range from here to here, 20 hertz, 20,000 hertz. Wave files, they have all of those frequencies. MP3s, depending on the quality of the MP3, it starts cutting off high frequencies. Mm-hmm. And I think it goes down to about, if you go to like an 8-bit, you know, MP3, it'll go down to 12,000 as opposed to at a 20. Don't quote me on the number, but I know it'll cut down to 16. It may go a little bit further, but basically you're losing high end. You're losing detail. And that is what a wave is. You know, there's a steep fall in those frequencies after 16,000 where it just comes off like a cliff. They just get completely chopped off. Mm-hmm. And that's all I'll say about waves.
Yeah, so
when you go to MP3.
Yeah, wave much are higher quality. That's just a fact. That is an indisputable fact. However, they also create bigger files. The file
much bigger.
It's probably like double the size at least. If you record,
much more than that.
Really?
Much more
so
than that.
If I record an hour of audio is about 100 megabytes.
Yep.
It's a tenth of a gigabyte. How much would an hour of the same audio be in a wave?
You mean MP3?
MP3 to wave, yeah. So
which one is 100?
So an hour of MP3 is about 100 megabytes.
Okay, so you're probably at like 192 sample rate. Okay.
So and what's that same audio in a wave? How big is it?
300.
It's about 3 times the size then.
Yeah, 300. Okay. You know, 400. It also depends on the sample rate, but yeah, you're looking at probably, you know, double, triple times the size.
Okay. So that means that it's triple. Yeah. So the reason why it doesn't matter is for podcasting specifically. It's exclusively a podcasting thing. If you upload a WAV file to an RSS feed, it's going to go in as a WAV file, but once it runs through iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google, or Anchor even, they're going to automatically compress the audio to MP3 quality anyway.
They're trying to save server space, y'all.
Exactly. And the reason they do that is because of server space. When you upload...
And bandwidth.
When you upload to a distribution platform, it costs... The amount of downloads you get technically costs them money. Because it's using the server space. And it's getting... And when it gets downloaded, it uses their server space. So the bigger the file, the more expensive the cost is going to be. Nash can explain this a lot better than I can. But basically... They compress it from a WAV file to an MP3 file quality to save money.
Think about it like physical storage.
Yeah.
You could, I'll just say that.
Yeah.
Physical storage. You have a cup this small versus something this big. Then it's going to be easy to store more of these. You're going to need to spend more money to get more space, and that's the game. And people's internet connections, it takes a lot to hear a wave. You're streaming a 300 megabyte file as opposed to a 30 megabyte file, 50 megabyte file.
Yeah.
Big difference.
It's big difference. So you can record in WAV. Like if a company tells you we record in WAV, just be like, who cares? It doesn't matter. Because by the time you upload it, it's gonna be there's gonna be
for podcasts.
For podcasting.
Yeah.
Like if you're doing movies and stuff, WAV files is definitely the way to go because they'll put the extra money in. But specifically for podcasting, you won't be able to hear the difference between a regular MP3 going through the RSS feed as opposed to a WAV file being compressed into the RSS feed. It's gonna sound pretty much the exact same.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a slight difference, but you have to know what you're looking for.
You'd have to do it for a living.
Yeah, 99.9% of your audience will not be able to hear the difference.
Exactly.
So yeah, waves are cool, but for podcasting, it's not necessary. But also, Riverside also records on separate audio and video tracks, which is really cool.
Oh, SquadCast didn't do that?
No, I don't know if SquadCast, I think, does video. They should. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I liked how it was a multi-track. It was basically like having a DAW on a browser.
Yeah.
Which is, that's a lot of back-end coding.
It is a lot of back-end coding.
I love it.
Riverside also local and cloud storage. We just went over that. They have a built-in editor, which is huge. So it kind of this adds an extra feature to SquadCast because you can record and edit in the same platform, which is just like a DAW. They have audio transcription, which is a great feature if it's accurate.
I did not test that.
I did not test that. Like, honestly, I have not met a good one. I have not seen a great one because it's very hard. Because someone like me who talks fast and mumbles a little bit.
Well, and what about accents?
Accents, yep. Proper nouns sometimes.
I mean, slang.
Like
no one speaks like a complete robot.
Yeah.
You're going to say gonna, you're going to say wanna, you're going to say gotta, like all of these things.
You're going to like, if I say talking with Tarashuk, a transcription service is not going to know what the fuck I'm talking about. So, like, it's cool that it's in there. Adobe also has one. So I use one in Premiere. If you notice on our clips on TikTok or YouTube Shorts, whatever, I do include subtitles. Audition does do Premiere does do an auto transcription. But I go back and edit. They add periods where periods shouldn't be all the time. They make up words all the time. So, transcription service, cool feature if it works well. My guess is it doesn't work well because it's probably very expensive to create. My guess. I don't know. That's my guess. So really cool if it works well. Team collaboration on their back end can divide between hosts, producers, and editors. And guests, as Christian said.
Yep.
And you can have up to 8 people per session in a recording. So I guess that means you could have 8 people on a panel. You could have 2 guests and like some PR reps. Like say like I'm interviewing a C-suite executive, like a CFO, and someone from their team wants to listen on the podcast. They're allowed to. I could have them in the session, up to 8 people. Or like say someone on my team wants to listen in. Right? They can do that. You can, I guess that's kind of cool because have like you can have up to 7 people. Like if it's you and a guest, you can have up to 6 fans listening on your podcast. They just gotta make sure they're muted and their cameras off, which you can handle. You can do. So stuff like that is cool. You can utilize it and be creative with it. They also have screen sharing, which is like a Zoom feature. So if they're giving a presentation, they can share their screen, which is just a great feature for podcasting. It saves you editing work in the back ends. So like if I could just not have to edit in B-roll and they can just screen share it and hit play, great. That's super useful. They also have live streaming, which I did not know. We're getting some pretty high, into some high tech stuff here.
I'm telling you, man, this Riverside thing, it's even with the, I mean, for 50, even if it's not included in the free tier, I mean, I think some of the live streaming, that might be $15 a month.
That'd probably be $24 a month.
I mean,
that's an exclusive service for sure.
Yeah, I mean, no,
I don't know.
From what I remember, I think it was actually part of the free tier. I mean, the thing is, this company, they're trying to make it so there's no reason for you not to use their platform. Clearly, with all of the features,
and they're very good at it. Apparently. So live streaming is really cool. As I wonder how that works though, because how many platforms can they distribute to, or is it like an OBS where it can go to one and that one can be a restream?
That I don't remember. I did look into it, but I don't remember what I saw there.
Right.
But either way, if you can go to one place, then maybe it goes to a place like Restream, where that goes to multiple places.
Yeah.
I think they have a partnership or some sort.
Probably. They can also do custom branding. So you can, how like we in our videos have our custom branding, our logos in here. You can do that on Riverside, which people love. That's a great feature. They also allow for custom frame rates. So Christian, elaborate the difference between frame rates and what frame rates mean.
Okay, you got me doing all the geeky stuff today.
Hell yeah.
Frame rate. Frame rate is basically you have like 30 frames per second, 60 frames per second. All a video is a whole bunch of pictures, 30 or 60 taken per second to represent motion. So 60 frames per second means you have more pictures and therefore more detail and therefore more accuracy with the motion. Instead of, you take one of those flip books where it's like,
yep.
Except you get 60 of them. So you get a full range of motion.
The motion is way smoother.
How smooth do you want the video to be? Riverside evidently can customize that for you to tell your camera to do 30 frames per second or 60 frames per second.
Could I do like 45 frames per second?
I've never heard of 45 frames per second.
All right, so it's like they have like in tiers, like anything.
We're doing. I think we're doing 30 right now. So
the standard's 30.
The standard is 30.
Or it's like even it's like 29.9 or something.
Yeah, and it's very rare to see 60 frames per second. There's actually, I saw one movie with it, a Will Smith movie that came out on Netflix not too long ago.
When he's a cop with like the blue alien.
Yeah, it's the one where he's like fighting his younger self somehow.
Yeah.
A lot of people complained about the way the movie looked because it seemed too real.
It looks weird.
It looks almost 3-dimensional.
Like the Hobbit movies.
I haven't seen the
Back in 2013, they were filmed, I think, in 60 FPS, and people said it looked really weird.
It looks weird.
Yeah, it does. Like on camera, it looks, because they're so used to 90. Oh, no, sorry, not 30.
30, yeah.
So 60 looks a little different. Oh, yeah, it's like on Monday Night Football, they have those 8K cameras, and it looks so detailed. Like the background's a little blurred because it looks so real.
Right.
Like WWE uses them too, because like Fox has a partnership with them. They're really cool. They look amazing, but it takes some getting used to. It takes your eyes.
I mean, because if you're, I mean, a camera is an eye. If you're looking at,
it's a lens.
You're looking out of your eyes into something that is starting to resemble what your eyes sees. It starts to seem like it's just actually there in front of you, and you're not watching something.
Yeah.
But that's all about frame rate.
All right.
Similar thing with sample rate, but we can get into that.
Yeah, that's an audio editing thing, which is a few episodes later.
It also doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Because of what it's going to get boiled down to.
Interesting. That's good to know as well. So then, I must have Transistor. Riverside also has a mobile app. So
that's a game changer.
Is it only on the phone or is it downloaded on the computer?
So I don't know if it has a downloadable desktop version.
Yeah, that was the one thing that confused me.
I used it on the browser. I used it on Google Chrome. But I do like how it does have a mobile app.
If I had to do all of these features on my phone, I would lose my mind.
Yeah, but the thing is, maybe your guest doesn't have a webcam.
Yeah, and they can just be on their phone.
And they could just be on the phone. And we're talking about phones in 2022.
Yeah.
You know, crazy megapixels and, you know, all of the stuff. I think that's really helpful. It's really helpful.
So yeah, Riverside, if you think that's for you, go check it out. It's in free $15 and $24 a month tiers. As of recording this, as the platform grows, it's going to go up. And the features are going to be less and less.
It's riverside.fm. So if you go looking for .com, you're not going to find it.
Yeah, .fm. So, yeah, cool. That's all the software. I did add Rodecaster Pro or similar interfaces. I should have put this in the hardware section, but since we're talking about recording, it makes sense here. So I have, as in the last episode I showed, the Rodecaster Pro. It's a mixer / interface, which I guess you'd call it what, an interface or a mixer?
I would call...
It's a little bit of both. It's like a hybrid. Because it has the knobs in like the sliders and the knobs.
Are these motorized?
No, they're manual.
Okay. It looks like it's designed specifically for podcasts.
It is.
So I can't throw shade at it, even though I want to. I want to because mixers, they're usually not designed for you know, for recording.
Yeah, it is made specifically for podcasting. We're gonna go like in depth all the different features, like you over my shoulder going through different features. Once I show you exactly what it does, it's pretty cool.
I will also explain why interfaces. Now this looks like it's probably actually a hybrid.
Okay.
But I'll also go into why interfaces are better than mixers, as opposed to just telling you that mixers aren't for recording typically.
Well, technically, that's the episode before, so technically we already did it, even though we haven't recorded it yet. But that's a little inside baseball.
Okay.
So we have and will get into that.
Yeah.
We're ridiculous.
Time machines.
All right, yeah. So the Rodecaster. I use it as a backup. So the thing about this thing is it has internal recording capabilities. It lets you do everything you would need with the push of a button. So theoretically, I could go to someone's office with the Rodecaster and 2 mics, not need a computer, not need a software, not need anything. Just press record, and it's going to record for me. It records locally on the mixer. Now, it does require a micro SD card. There's a little micro SD slit in the back, which is sold separately. I think mine's like 32 gigabytes. And you can transfer them from the SD card onto your computer using the interface itself, which is an app on your PC or Mac, and you just put the mixer into interface into transfer mode, and it transfers everything over. It records in wave. Here's the way I don't like about it. It records in WAV files.
Ugh.
Yeah, is right.
I hate high quality.
But there's a few though. So the mixer / interface has 14 available tracks, in like the left and right ear. So it's like left and right ear for the mic 1 through 4. And then it's like left and right ear for Bluetooth, phone, USB, and the sound bar. Right? Now, say I'm just using the USB, which is like a Zoom call, and my mic, which is channel 1. It will record all of them. And it'll just be blank. So, like, I upload the file into Audition, and it's like 14 tracks for one file.
Wait, what?
I'll show you. It's weird. It's very weird. That's why I use it as a backup.
14 tracks for how many files?
1. It's like it's one file, but it's like I gotta manually unclick the L and R's so I can get this what I want, copy and paste to a new track. It's bizarre. It's weird.
You can't just record in mono? It sounds like each track you're recording is in stereo.
It is in stereo. Yeah, so everything's in stereo. But it's like, so there's 4 tracks for the mics, right? But say I have 2, 3, and 4 turned off and the faders are down, it will still record those faders, those tracks. Just be blank.
You can't not.
There might be. I'm not sure.
Well, because wait,
I've been trying to figure it out.
From my understanding, it records locally on the machine and then it transfers.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You might need to bust out the manual for that one.
Yeah. So it's.
But I do see. I was reading the specs on it. Thing is pretty impressive spec wise. Up to par with a lot of industry standards. It does say that you can just plug it into your computer via USB as opposed to feeding it through a micro SD card.
You can.
And if you do it that way, I'm 90% sure you won't have this problem.
No, I don't. I use it in my computer and I record on multi-track and Audition.
Okay.
But as a backup,
as a backup.
In case, like I'm having the crackling issue on Audition, so I'm doing it as a backup locally on the mixer. Or let's say I'm on Zoom, and I'm bringing my video feeds into vMix on my desktop. I gotta record on my laptop because I gotta do a virtual audio input, which means I can't get recorded on the desktop. So I record it on the laptop and do a backup locally on the mixer.
Okay.
But after 32 minutes of recording, it creates a new file, which is also I don't like.
Don't like that.
Don't like either. So but everything's in sync. Everything lines up. So it's got to put the files next to each other. It's just extra steps for no reason. So you could do this as a podcaster. Just know you're going to annoy the hell out of your editor because you're going to give them like 11 gig. Say it's an hour. You're going to give them like 11 gigabytes of audio.
Of wave files.
Wave
stereo files.
Right? So if it's an hour and a half podcast, they're going to get like 6 files, and it's going to be annoying. So I would not recommend it. It's great as a backup. And you can't edit on the interface. You got to use an Audition or whatever. So you need it, and you got to piece it together. So that's all that. That's all of our equipment. That's all of our software. If you find one that works for you, try it out. Let us know what you think. And we'll go from there. Next episode, we are one step closer to production. We're going to talk about planning out your first episode, what your very first episode should be, how to start an intro, the art of the intro, how to create a good intro like the one you've heard on all the Talking with Tarashuk podcasts, the difference between a cold open like you've heard on this podcast, the difference between a pre-recorded intro, which you've heard on most of my podcasts, and the difference between a combo of both, which is what I do on basically all of my podcasts. We're going to talk about music beds, talking over music, how I do my intros, and what your basics of a first episode should be, introducing your podcast to the internet and the world. So that is going to be all very exciting. We'll get to you next time. But Christian, your plugs, my friend. Time to get out of here.
Yep. Cube Recording Studios, full functional studio. We do podcasts, like we're doing right now, audio and video capable, music, whatever you name it. In this case, podcasts. If you're interested in recording a podcast, you can reach out at cuberecordingstudios.com. If you're not a do-it-yourselfer, you heard that we have the expertise. We can handle everything for you. cuberecordingstudios.com.
And my name is Will Tarashuk. It's T as in Thomas, Arashuk. Thank you so much for listening and watching in our how-to podcast series brought to you by Ambiguous Podcast Solutions. We will see you next time, but until then, y'all take care.